Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome along to this afternoon's session where we're looking at bank feeds and also rules for Sage 50 accounts. My name is Michael. I'm going to be your host for today's session, and today's session should last in approximately 45 minutes, during which time we'll obviously run through some demos. We'll try and pick up any questions you need as well, and also explain where you can find out additional support, where you can find additional support for bank feeds if you need it. A little bit of housekeeping just before we get started. So as usual, you don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you've got one and you've enabled it, you'll just find you muted automatically. Now that doesn't mean you can't ask any questions, but if you do have questions for us, you will need to pop them into the questions panel, which you should see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you can't currently see that, just click your little link on your toolbar, the one that looks like the little speech bubble containing the question mark. Should expand the panel, and you should see the box in the bottom right where you can start typing any questions and comments you might have. So we're joined today by Jackie and also Tina, who will be on hand to answer those questions, and I'll try and pick up a few of them myself as well. But hopefully you'll see what bank feeds is all about today and have a good idea whether it's right for you or not. You can download a copy of today's slides via the handout option, so that's available for you. It will also be included via the link which you will receive on the follow-up email around about an hour after we finish today. So watch out for that one. Let's have a look at what we're going to be covering in this session. So a little bit of background as to what a bank feed actually is, touch on some of those common questions and setting up. We're then going to run through a demonstration. So I've got a video that I'm going to play for you at that point of the demonstration, just so we get a consistent message across. So we'll run that through, and then we'll just obviously have a little bit more discussion about the rules option towards the end, explain a little bit about some of the upcoming webinars that we've got planned in, and if there are any outstanding questions at that point, we will then obviously try and answer as many as we can. Plenty of support information available for you. Now, just before I start running through the demonstration today, I'm going to add a poll on the screen. So the question today is nice and simple. Do you currently use bank feeds? So if you just want to give me a yes, if you do, and no, maybe you've chosen not to, maybe you've looked at it in the past and thought, well, that's not for me. Maybe you don't know what a bank feed is, which is why you're coming along in today's session. So if you don't mind choosing an option, we'll just wait till we get a decent percentage of you having voted. Then I'll share the results with you as well. Some of you might be using bank feeds and you're coming along today just to, maybe you've dabbled with it, not really got up and running with it yet, or maybe you're just toying with using it at this stage. Right, okay, we'll close the poll at that point. So we've got about just under 80% of you having voted there. So let me share the results with you so you can see what that is as well. So we've got 13% of you today saying yes, you are using a bank feed, 27% saying no, maybe you've looked at it in the past and you've just chosen not to, and 60% of you probably not got a clue what a bank feed actually is. Right, let's get rid of that. And we'll get started with the demo. So putting bank feeds in simple terms, it's basically setting up a link between your bank account and your Sage Account software. Now it is a read-only link, so it'll only pull information down from your bank. So it's not, if you enter a payment in Sage, for instance, it's not going to push that into your accounts and make that payment for you. There are other services that will do that for you, but bank feed, essentially it's a read only. So as transactions clear your bank, that information will be essentially downloaded. Now the benefits of using a bank feed, and the idea is it'll speed up your manual reconciliation process. So it'll download your bank transactions for you. You can then compare them to those that you've entered in Sage. So you're not hanging around waiting for paper statements or logging into your online banking to get at that information. You're setting up a link, so essentially you've got that readily available. Now, once transactions are downloaded, and you'll see this in the demo today, it's a case of matching those transactions to those that you've entered in Sage. So you can match them, and any that you haven't yet entered in Sage, you can easily create them within the bank feed screen. One of the big benefits of using a bank feed as well is the rules option. So you can set up a rules option so that if a transaction downloads and based on the rules and the criteria that you set up, if it recognizes that transaction, you can set up basically a set of instructions as to what you want the software to do with that. So things like direct debits and standing orders, the common transactions that you think of, things like bank fees and bank charges. I think we've got an example of one of those in the recording that we're going to play for you in a bit as well. So those common transactions and regular transactions, they'll probably have the same reference each and every time. Some of them may even have the same value each and every time. And in that situation, if you were to set up a rule that says, when you see this transaction, what I want you to do is this, it means that you've got less involvement in that and means that you save even more time because the transactions will be processed automatically. Now, rules are something that you can and you probably will set up over a period of time. You can set up as many as you want. There's no restriction on that one. So it's something that you will build up. And obviously, the more rules that you do set up, the more automated it's going to be. The more automated it is, the more time you're going to save. But you'll see all of this in the demo in just a few minutes. Now, some of the common questions, and I'm sure we'll get these questions during the session as well today. So how do you set up a bank feed? Now, depending who you bank with and also which version you're using as well, it can differ. So what I would suggest to you, so that I don't have to run through X number of demos today, is there is information available on the Help Center. It is just an admin task, that one of setting it up. So it's nice and easy. So just into the Help Center, it'll start guiding you through, where you want this version, that version, this is what you need to do. Also, is your bank supported? So basically, when you go through the process of setting up a bank feed, it's the easiest way to tell, is your bank supported? I don't know them off the top of my head. So is your bank supported? Have a look in the bank feeds area. If your bank's listed, then yes, it's supported. If it isn't, then it's pretty black and white. It's not currently supported. Now, if your bank isn't currently supported, what I would suggest you do, and if you've attended a version 29 webinar or possibly even a version 28.1, you'll know that we mention quite a bit on if you've got any requests for changes to the software, suggestions, that type of thing, pop them onto the roadmap. It's easy to do that. So if your bank isn't currently supported, get it onto the roadmap. You can do that from within your software and make that suggestion. That's how you would submit that request. And what if you're using remote data access, which formerly was known as Sage Drive? Well, remote data access these days will only work on the latest version, so that shouldn't really cause you any problems. It used to historically, when there were such things as sites as far as Sage Drive was concerned, and also when it changed to remote data access, there was a main site, remote site, and you would only be able to use the bank feed from whichever site you set that up from. But that's not the case these days. Again, if you've got any questions like that, it will be answered within the Help Center. If you've downloaded the link as well, the handout, I should say, the links on the bottom of these slides will work for you, but the information is nice and easy for you to find. So setting up wise, as I mentioned, follow the steps within our Help Center. You've got the link on there as well for setting up bank feeds, so it's nice and easy. It also depends on whether you've set up on any of the other connected services. So there's 3 which are sort of grouped together. There's bank feeds, remote data access, and also invoice payments. If you've already set any of those services up, it's nice and easy just to then switch on bank feeds, because you've already connected, or you've got the connected service settings entered. If you haven't, the process is going to look a little bit different. So as I say, this is where you need to refer to the information in the Help Center to guide you through the process, which will be specific to you. Right, so at this stage, this is the demonstration. This is the order of the demonstration. So we're going to play a little video for you at this stage. It does last about 15 minutes, this video. So we're going to go through showing you what it looks like to download your transactions. And this will give you a good idea, obviously, of what a bank feed is and how it works. What a bank feed doesn't do, and I'll quickly mention this one, it doesn't, when you set up that link, it doesn't automatically just enter all that information into your Sage account. So if you've made a payment to a supplier in sort of real life outside of your accounts, it doesn't automatically necessarily just enter that in your accounts. It comes via the bank feed, and then you can either match it, create that missing transaction, or you could set up a rule to create that transaction for you. But we'll play the video. Obviously, we'll be picking up questions in the background along the way, and we will hang around for questions after that video is finished as well. So keep your questions and your comments coming. But we'll set that going now, and I'll come back to you live in about 15 minutes. We're now going to run through a demonstration so you can see what the process looks like when you're using a bank feed. Now, we've already got a bank feed set up in our example. So step one, we're going to pop into bank accounts. Make sure you've got the right bank account selected, so our bank current account in this case, and then I'm going to click bank feeds. So this is what the bank feed screen looks like. Now, if you're familiar with the standard reconciliation option, that's equivalent of this option on the right-hand side. The boxes on the left-hand side are going to be the transactions that download from your bank. Now, at the moment, both sides are empty. So what I'm going to do, just to pull through my Sage transactions, I'm just going to set the date back. And if I just press tab, you'll see essentially the transactions that I've entered against this bank account that haven't yet been reconciled. The next step is to download my transactions. Nice and easy. We click download transactions. So we'll get a message pop up saying the amount of time required to download transactions will depend upon the number of transactions and the speed of your internet connection. Should be very quick in my example, so I'm just going to click OK to that one. A little bit of a progress bar just as it downloads. Tells me the sync is complete. And that's it done. I'm ready to start matching my transactions. Once you've downloaded your transactions, you're ready to start and match them. Now, when you first download your transactions, there might be a bit of a grey area where it downloads some transactions that you don't need. You've already processed those within your accounts. Maybe you've already reconciled. So if that is the case, it would just be a case of selecting the transaction or transactions that you want to get rid of, and then you can click ignore, and that will remove them from the list. After that, it's a case of working through your transactions and selecting the appropriate match. So if, for instance, we take this first one, this transaction for £1,034.99, we find the equivalent transaction that we've already entered into Sage, and we can select it. Now, because of the same value, we can click match. When we click match, it moves them into that bottom box. And we would just continue doing that, just like you were working from a paper statement, or if you're working from online banking, you would work through it in pretty much the same way, working through your bank transactions and finding the equivalent one that you've entered in Sage. So we can highlight the next one, highlight the equivalent one, and click match. Now you can select more than one transaction. So for instance, we've got a transaction here, £66.66. There's not an equivalent transaction as a single entry that we've entered into Sage, but we do have transactions, two transactions that are the equivalent of that one. So if that's the case, we can select both transactions. Now, if you find when you're selecting a transaction, it just moves the highlight. It's all to do with your list selection style that you've got set within Sage. So what you can do is just highlight your first one, hold down your control key, and then select your other transaction or transactions. Now, as both highlighted areas, they add up to the same amount, we've got the match option available. We click match and it moves the appropriate transactions into the bottom box. Now, that will actually be quicker reconciling in that way than probably working from a paper statement or referring to your online banking. So rather than logging into your online banking, it's just pulling that information down automatically. However, you've got some other benefits to using a bank feed as well. So what we'll do, I'll just quickly unmatch everything to move everything back to the top box. And then I want to quickly demonstrate the auto match option. Now, when we click auto match, what it will do, it will run through your transactions that you've downloaded from your bank, and it will try to identify an equivalent transaction that you've entered in Sage. Now, transactions must be within 4 days of each other, and it must be the same value, and it is on a one-to-one basis as well. So I click auto match. Any matches it does find, it'll move the appropriate transactions back into the bottom box. If it finds a transaction, so for instance, there was a bank transaction and it finds more than one possible matches, then it will give you the choice. So it will say, right, which of your Sage transactions does this one relate to? So you will then be able to select it and then match it. So auto match potentially can save you quite a bit of time when it comes to that matching process. Now the one it hasn't matched, that one we looked at a moment ago, we'll just quickly match that one again. So the £66.66 will highlight the equivalent two transactions. So remember, when I highlight the first transaction, hold down the control key, select the second one, they add up to the same values, the highlights. So we click match and it moves them down to that bottom box. Now we're left with two transactions where there's no equivalent transaction on that we've already entered into Sage itself. So we're going to select this one here, just for just over £10,500. So we've got nothing equivalent to that one entered at the moment. So we'll highlight it and we're going to click create. So similar, if you were working in the standard bank reconciliation option, you can select your transaction or you can enter it there and then. So we select the transaction that's downloaded, click create, and then choose what it is we want to enter. So in this case, we're going to say it's a customer receipt. We'll OK that one. Now it fills in quite a bit of the information for us. So it's pulled through the date from what it's downloaded, it's picked up the reference, and it's also got the amount as well. So all I'm going to do there is I'm going to choose the relevant customer. It'll list what's outstanding on that customer account. And I know this time round that the receipt value, it does add up to those two transactions that are listed. If I didn't, I could go down and I could select the transaction that this receipt relates to. So I would just complete that receipt column. Now, because I know this value relates to both of these, I'm just going to click automatic. It'll pop the value in the receipt column for me. I can click save, and that's it done. It's moved that transaction into the bottom box, and it's entered that transaction into my accounts at that point. So there would be a customer receipt against that A1 Demos account at that point. The final one I'm going to do is this bank fee. So again, select the transaction. There's no equivalent transaction entered in Sage at this point. So I'm going to click create and I'm going to enter the bank fee as a bank payment. So I'll just OK that one. And then I can again fill in the details. So it knows what bank account, because that's the bank that we're processing the bank feed against. It's picked up the date, it's picked up the reference. Just going to pop in the relevant nominal code. So 7901 for bank charges. I'll just put bank charges in the details as well. Now, bank charges if you are based in the UK, are classed as being exempt of VAT for VAT purposes, so we'd normally choose T2. Something to be aware of, if I just choose T2, so select it from the list, it doesn't amend that value. So it'll work it just zeroes out the tax in this case, so I will need to amend the value. So just to remind me what that was, if I just close out of that one, it was £87.50. So I'll just quickly whiz through that process again. So we'll just OK that one, pop in the nominal code. pop in some details. So it was £87.50, and then we're going to set that to T2, which is for exempt transactions. And then we can save it. And at that point, all of the transactions that we've downloaded, we've managed to match against equivalent transactions in Sage, or we've entered the missing transactions. And that's the bank feed complete at that point. So we matched everything we needed to. We've then got a number of options at the bottom, and that's what we're going to look at next, and it's to finish off the reconciliation process. So I'm going to click confirm and continue to reconcile. And when I do that, it takes me as if I'm going into the standard bank reconcile option. So it's got the relevant bank selected. It's pulled through a statement reference. So you'll remember the statement reference is made up of your bank account number, the date in reverse order, 01, because it's the first time I've reconciled this account on this date. Pop in the ending balance, so whatever balance you're trying to agree to. So if you've been looking at your online banking, you will pop that balance in there. Pop in the date that you're reconciling up to. I'm just going to accept the two defaults in this case. I don't need to enter anything in these boxes, interest earned or account charges. I've already processed those within the bank feed window itself. Are you okay with that? And all of the bank transactions that we've selected are automatically moved into that bottom box. Now, you may still have transactions in the top box at that point, so there may be transactions that you've entered into Sage that you haven't found a match for yet, so hasn't downloaded via your bank feed the equivalent transaction. So there may be transactions there. There aren't any in my case. Everything's entered. You can see the matched balance equals the statement balance, and I'm left with a difference of 0. So that's fine. All I need to do at that point to finish my reconciliation process is click reconcile, get the little progress bar, and return to the bank accounts window, and that's it done. So as you can see, potentially that can be a good time saver using a bank feed. The final area that we're going to look at with you in the demonstration today is rules. Now, initially when you look at rules, you're going to look at your recurring or think about your recurring transactions. So probably things like direct debits and standing orders, those transactions that happen on a regular basis. So it's a great opportunity to save yourself a little bit of time. So what we're going to say in this example is this bank fee. So we're going to say, right, every time we charge bank fees, that's going to appear on our bank statement with the same reference. There'll be transactions where, such as some of the others that I've got, you may have, like C115, for instance, but it's got to be something that the software can recognize. So when the transaction downloads, if the software recognizes it based on the rules that you set up, it can process it automatically, so that you then don't even need to get involved in that process. So rather than bank feeds downloading every month and us then highlighting the transaction and clicking create, we set up a rule and it'll process it automatically. Now, to set up a rule, it must be in the matched area. So we've got the bank feed or the bank fee already selected and it's highlighted. And then we can click the option to create a rule. So we'll give it a name. We'll just call it bank fees. And then we need to choose some conditions. So you can choose one or more. Now we're going to choose the reference. We're going to say, right, when that transaction downloads, it's probably going to have the reference bank fee. That could be the name of the company. It could be an account reference, whatever would normally appear on your bank statement. Now I can choose the amount as well. So things like direct debits and standing orders, it may be the same amount every month. If it's likely to change, you wouldn't add the amount in. But if I wanted to add that in, obviously it pulls through the value automatically. it means that as transaction download, it's going to look for a transaction which has the reference bank fee and is 87.50. So that value is going to change. I don't want to leave that condition set up. That's the only one in this instance that I want to set up. I'm going to click Add at the bottom. When I click Add at the bottom, this gives you the opportunity to split your transaction. So if, for instance, this was maybe a bit like dual fuel, for instance, if you had a direct debit going out for gas and electric, but you've got two separate nominal codes, what I could say is, right, I want 60% to go to a certain nominal code, the other 40% to go to this nominal code. But I'm just going to leave it set to 100, so the full value I want to link to, or I want it to post as, in this case, it's going to be a payment to the nominal 7901. I want it to use the tax code for an exempt transaction, so D2, and I want it to have the narrative of bank fee. Obviously, as you can see, you could potentially link the transaction to a customer record or a supplier record. So I'll just leave it at that. I'll click Add, and then I'm going to save the rule. So it tells me the rule is being saved. So I'll just OK that one. Now I want to see the rules that I've got set up just within the bank feed window. I can go into Manage Rules. It'll list it. And then I've got an option here that says Review Before Posting. Now what this will mean is, as the transactions download and it identifies that transaction, do I want it just to process that transaction automatically and enter that into my accounts? Or do I want to review that and see that beforehand? When you first start using bank feeds, I think probably the sensible option would be to leave it ticked so you can see that. But as you gain more and more confidence with it, you probably find that more and more of these you take the tick out of, just so that you save even more time by automatically processing the transactions as they download via the bank feed. The final demonstration that we're going to quickly run through is just to show you how you can process your bank feed rules. So in this case, we've already downloaded some transactions in the background. We're just going to go within the bank accounts window into bank feeds approval at the top. And in this case, applying the rules to the transactions that I've downloaded, it's identified one transaction. So in this instance, I can tick it and I can say, do I want to approve that transaction or reject it? And obviously, as you build up your rules over time, you're going to probably have loads of transactions listed. So just be the case of selecting your transaction. Do you want to approve it or reject it? And remember, you can also go in to modify your rules, so you don't need to do the approval going forward. So in this case, I've got that one ticked. I'm going to approve it. Transaction disappears, and also, if we were to go back into bank feeds, that transaction that had downloaded into the bank feeds window, that would have disappeared. It would now just be sat there on the reconciliation window. Okay, so I'm back live with you at that point. So hopefully that's given you a good idea of how bank feeds works. And it's not going to be for everyone, but in many instances, it can save you a lot of time compared to just manually reconciling. It just makes it just that little bit slicker. And with the rules option, if you're in the right position where you've got these repetitive transactions, such as loads of direct debits, standing orders, it means it can process it automatically. And obviously, the more rules you have, the more recognizers, the more automated it is, and therefore, the more time you're going to save. So, Alison, your question there, just with regard to the bank rules, Alison's just asking, can we just confirm that any new bank rule which is set up will only apply to sort of the next transactions you download? So yeah, it's only going to apply to transactions as you download them. If you've downloaded any transactions incidentally, by the way, that you maybe think, well, actually I've already processed them in my account, so I don't need to do anything with them. What you can do is highlight the transaction, and there is an ignore option within the relevant screen as well. So that should be on the, I think it's on the right-hand side, that ignore option. So with regard to rules as well, it is, you can only create rules based on your matched transactions. So a question from, it was Karen earlier saying the create rule option was grayed out. So what you need to do, just to confirm that, catches a lot of people out, that one. You can't just set your rules up in advance. You've got to match your transactions, and then you say, right, once it's matched and you've moved it into the bottom box, you can highlight the transaction and then you can create the rule. That's when it will become active. You can't, so you couldn't set, just set up bank feeds and say, right, I want to set up 10 rules in advance. You've got to match them, and once you've matched, that's your opportunity to base a rule on what you've matched going forward. So again, with the rules, when you're setting those up, you'll be able to assign them to a nominal code, you'll be able to specify tax codes, and also customers and suppliers as well. So if, for instance, when you pay, when a customer pays you, if they always quote their account number, and going forward, you've maybe then set up a rule, if it recognizes that transaction when a customer pays you online and it downloads the transaction, it can automatically post that across to the customer's account. And obviously, the idea with this is that transactions will be automatically created straight from your bank. So it saves you having to enter them in manually. So for some, that will be a big time saver. That others, you might be thinking, well, actually, I don't have a lot of these transactions, a lot of direct debit standing orders. You might just have a handful. Everything else, excuse me, everything else you might just think, well, actually, I'd just be keying it in manually. So you might look at it and think, well, actually, I'm not getting a lot of, I'm not going to save a lot. Donna, your question about setting up when you're getting a pop-up window about sharing your data with Plaid. So that's it's used as part of the service. So essentially, it's not a direct link between your accounts in your bank. It would go via this bank feed service. So again, the setup process may vary between banks and obviously versions of Sage 50 as well. So if you need that, the information on setting up, you'll find it in our help center. Right, let's just move on. So help center, as I said, loads of information in there. You'll find knowledge base articles, there's support guides in there. So it's not just for bank feeds. Help Center just about covers anything and everything to do with your software, and probably a bit more as well. The support guides are very comprehensive. You'll find videos in there as well on certain processes. And also, if you're working in a certain area and you're trying to find help on a certain area, if you can't find it, it will suggest you the best way for getting in touch with our support team. So do use that Help Center. Remember, you can just press F1 at any time, and it should bring up the help relating to whatever it is you're looking at within the software. Just to quickly mention some of the upcoming webinars as well. So we're running a number of sessions at the moment. What's new in version 29? You may have heard a little bit about version 29, where we are in the process of rolling that out. It is a phased rollout as well, just so that we're not getting inundated with loads of installation calls and people asking about new features, etc. So we tend to phase the rollout just to smooth that out a little bit. We've got year end coming up soon, also backing up your data. So covering the very basics as well as the schedule option. And our March sessions will be available to book onto soon. So keep an eye out on the webinar timetable. Links will be provided on your follow-up email, which you will receive in round about an hour's time. Emailing documents has been a common request as well. So we've already run the intro sessions on emailing statements and emailing invoices. If you missed those sessions and it's something you think you may benefit from, because they can be a big time saver, potentially a good cost saver as well, those ones. Then again, check out the recordings, links included in your follow-up email. And if you're interested in attending either of the advanced sessions, we got one tomorrow and also one next week. So please get yourself signed up for those as well. So all the links you need for watching recordings and signing up for future live sessions, all included on the follow-up email. Right, okay, now that brings us to the end of what we'd planned to demo. Obviously, still some questions coming through, so we will try and pick up as many of those as we can. Again, if you've got something very specific though, we may need to refer you across to our support team. But if you're about to leave, I hope you've enjoyed this session and it's given you a little bit of an insight into bank feeds. Again, there's about 60% of you said you didn't really have a clue what bank feeds was. So that's given you, hopefully that's given you a good idea now. And for some, you'll think, yeah, it's a great feature. I'm going to give it a try. You can always switch it off if you don't want to use it going forward. Just revert back to completely a manual reconciliation. Others, you might have thought, well, I've chosen not to use it so far. In the past, people have said they're a bit skeptical of that type of thing, linking with your bank accounts. So hopefully it's given you a little bit of confidence going forward. And for those of you that are currently using it, hopefully maybe it's just giving you a little bit of reassurance that what you're doing is right. For those of you that are using it that weren't able to set up rules, now you know your transactions have got to be in that bottom box matched. Make sure you select them and then you can click that create rule option. Catches a lot of people out, that one. Right, okay. I'm just going to mute my line for a moment, just to give a chance for you to put your questions in, and I'll come back to you in just a couple of minutes. Got a quick question from Karen there, just about can you set up the bank link or the bank feed completely from within your Sage software? In the majority of instances, yes, you will be able to do that, but again, it can differ. So sometimes it will depend on who you bank with. So it may be necessary because of a requirement from that specific bank that a form may need to be completed and sent to the bank before the bank feed is actually authorized. If anyone's about to leave as well, there will be a survey pop-up as you leave the session today. So if you can take a minute just to maybe pop some comments on that, some thoughts, ideas, maybe some suggestions for webinars you'd like to see going forward as well, be greatly appreciated. So if you can take a minute to do that, as I say, we love reading those comments just to see we're hitting the mark or what you'd like to see covered going forward. Karen, you mentioned who you bank with there. I can't cover specifics on this session. I don't know them all off the top of my head, and the only way I would find that out is by setting up a brand new account and trying to set up a bank feed for it, selecting the relevant bank along the way. So you would just need to follow that through. And as I say, there's so many banks on that list. There's probably banks you've never even heard of, and there's different banks just about every time I look at that list. So just follow that through. And obviously, if it prompts you to complete a form, it means it's necessary, it's a requirement imposed by your bank to be able to authorize that bank feed. But the vast majority, I think, you'll be able to set up very quickly. It's all online. One question as well that we do have with regard to transactions downloading, sort of a couple of related questions to this as well, is that in relation to specifying dates. So the dates that you see when you're downloading transactions, so within that bank feeds window, let me see if I can show you. So if I go into my bank feeds window, and we've got the dates up here at the top. So initially that's going to refer to your Sage transactions. So obviously the transaction that you download from your bank should be in date order, and you can choose what order you want to sort them in as well. So when you're looking for transactions, you know, if you want to put them in receipt order or payment order, you can put them in ascending or descending orders. You can just about throughout the software. So if you want to change the order, just click on the heading again. But by default, they will be in date order. But this date range at the top will refer to your Sage transactions. Right, on that note, we will quickly pop back to the slides one last time. So once again, many thanks for coming along. I hope you have enjoyed it. Again, if you can take a minute just to complete that short exit survey, that will pop up as you leave. Any thoughts, ideas that you want to share with us, that would be great. Your follow-up email should be with you in around about an hour's time. So that will include links so you can watch the recording of today's session. And also you can watch recordings of previous sessions as well. And also there'll be a link on there so you can register for some of our upcoming webinars as well. So many thanks, take care, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you again.